Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 10th of June 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And we've got Nick Green behind the technical desk, and we will be joined in a few minutes by Mark Anderson from American Free Press, who's going to be giving us the latest on the Bilderberg conference. Well, as always, what's the weather doing? Well, I'm delighted to say we've got a few reports of sunshine from Rhondda. Peterborough is a little bit overcast, but Accrington sunny. And I haven't got anything north of the border, so we'll say we think it's probably sunny, cloudy-ish. Should cover it, I think. Well, today we're very sad to have to begin with the fact that another key supporter, campaigner, has recently died. This gentleman has been remarkable in what he has achieved over many years. His name's Kevin Bull, and Kevin has been on UK Column several times, but also he's worked with a number of other media outlets talking about everything from child abuse to what's happening in politics. Kevin unfortunately passed away a few days ago, and Kevin and his wife Katie experienced the worst of the British government, the establishment, harassment and bullying. They absorbed it from the NHS, the police, and finally through the family courts, which resulted in their children being taken from them. Now, we're going to say that Kevin is going to be sadly missed. He brought in-depth analysis to what was going on, not only in Britain but worldwide. He'd got a very deep, penetrating intellect, and he was particularly looking at the rise of low empathy individuals into society, and particularly into positions of power within the political structure. So we've just got a couple of little pictures to remember Kevin by here. And of course, we'd like to remind people that Kevin had been very active on Orion Talk Radio, which had got an audience of millions in the US. And we did some joint talks with Kevin on that channel, talking about everything from Liverpool Care Pathway through to Agenda 21 population control. And Kevin had also been very active with Free Thinking Voice. And you can have a look online if you want to catch up on any of those podcasts or broadcasts that he did. So sad times. We've lost two very good men in the last couple of weeks. What does that say? I think it says that the onus is on all of the rest of us to carry on the good work, and I'm sure that they would have wanted us not to stop and get down in the dumps, but to think of the good work they did and to follow it up. Well, at that point, let's bring in Mark Anderson. Mark, I think we've got you there on the Skype line. He's just coming back to his desk. Well done. Mark, how are you?
Not so fine, so long as groups like Bilderberg continue to meet and ply their plans.
Yes, okay. Well, it's very kind of you to come back on the UK Column News. We're always delighted to have you. I've just got a screenshot of American Free Press website here, which of course is well, it's got your good self on the front talking about Bilderberg. We weren't able to get there. Tell us what you know. What's your analysis of what's happening at this exclusive and very secretive meeting?
Well, the facts on the ground, for starters, are that this is the hardest meeting I've ever seen, and I've covered Bilderberg since 2010, 3 times with Jim Tucker, 3 times since he passed away. This is the most difficult in terms of the topography of the land, the access to the hotel, getting any meaningful photos at all of who's there to compare with their so-called official list that they just posted on their website within the last 24 to 48 hours. And by the way, they published their so-called key topics, which is the longest one that I've seen, the most subjects listed, 16 in all this year, but vague like usual. But the facts on the ground are that this is a very, very secluded hotel. They have on both sides of the big side of the mountain going up to that hotel. I took a long cab ride this morning with a very accommodating cabbie, and the checkpoints are quite far. The nearest checkpoint that's blocked off is about 2 to 3 kilometers from the hotel, and the other access point, I'm told, is more than 5 kilometers. So even if you go through that checkpoint, which they won't let you through, you're still a good 5 kilometers away from the hotel on the main entrance. Very secluded, shrouded in heavy, dense forest. So pictures this time are the most difficult they're ever going to be. And even though I heard We Are Change, the group was there in the hotel beforehand, I'm not seeing any protesters on the ground as of this morning, say 10 a.m. local time. There were no protesters at either checkpoint. So it's a little disheartening in that sense compared to, say, 5-6 years ago. That's the basic facts on the ground. That's where we're at.
Sorry, Mark. What's the situation with? Do they have a similar setup to what they had in the UK with a zone for protesters, even if some do eventually turn up, or is everything just so secluded that they don't even need to bother with that?
Yeah, the latter. Everything is so secluded that it doesn't appear they need to bother with it, unless a whole bunch were to show up. But they wouldn't really be able to sequester them the way they did on the grounds of the Grove Hotel in 2013 in the UK. That was more set up for that. Or last year in Denmark was the exact opposite. We were very, very close to the hotel. We could literally see them going in and out. This is a 180 this year compared to Denmark last year. And that's one of the tough things about covering Bilderberg is you really don't know from year to year what you're dealing with exactly. Each year is a little different. So physical access is not good. Photography, therefore, very compromised. However, their published discussion list and their membership list is very notable in a lot of ways. And I've been able to discern some things that we can talk about here.
So what is on the subject list for discussion?
Well, that ties right into being able to kind of break down what they're talking about. And I have a pretty good idea about it. First of all, they have 16 topics. Usually they have 7, 8, maybe 9. Now listen to some of these topics. This is the stealth transparency I've talked about. They talk about, well, we're just a boys club with a few gals there, and we just want to be able to talk openly without pesky reporters with notebooks and pens eavesdropping. Here's their topics: Iran, Greece, NATO, Russia, USA. That's one of their topics. USA. There's some local siren going off here. Pardon the noise. Another one, interestingly enough, is U.S. elections. Now that one's notable because each time there's a presidential election in the U.S., we sometimes expect would-be presidential candidates to maybe be vetted by Bilderberg. And 3 U.S. presidential candidates have taken the first step and spoken to the Council on Foreign Relations, the foreign policy group founded in 1921. And that group is a very important adjunct or kind of philosophical building block and input line for Bilderberg. And that is Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina senator, Hillary Clinton, and Marco Rubio, one of the top Republican presidential would-be nominees. These 3 have already been vetted by the CFR, so I'm speculating whether any of them might be vetted by Bilderberg this year or other candidates. And the location this year is going to make that particularly difficult to verify. But I'll be checking their schedules. But you have some issues that I believe were explained somewhat in the Monday Financial Times by annual Bilderberg attendee Martin Wolf, a writer for the Financial Times. And I can get into that if you'd like. I think he kind of spilled the beans a bit. And I think we can discern when they say they're talking about Greece and whether they're talking about current economic issues. These are things on their list. When they're talking about European strategy and so on, I have a pretty good idea what's on their minds here.
Mark, thank you for that summary. Just for people who might not have come across Bilderberg before, what essentially we've got going on here is a discrete group of politicians, bankers, big business people, global corporations coming together to meet. You've called it stealth transparency, wonderful term, because they claim to be open. They try and make out they're open, but in fact those meetings are ultimately held behind closed doors, and clearly the public's excluded. But for people who are perhaps new to Bilderberg, let's just have a look at a couple of little photographs from The Guardian, which will underpin what you've been talking about. This one seems to be showing one of the checkpoint arrangements. Of course, it's bristling with police. It was the same when they were holding the meeting in UK, all paid for out of the public purse, although these are largely private persons meeting, and even the politicians are supposed to be meeting as private individuals. So here we've got part of the checkpoint Charlie. Charlie Skelton has written a feature in The Guardian on Bilderberg. I don't like one word of it, because basically he's twisting it. He's making it into some sort of funny semi-conspiracy theory. That's what I think he's doing. But he ends by saying this: for now, the story is Bilderberg 2015 has an extremely high-powered participant list featuring a large number of senior politicians and public figures. With participants this powerful and an agenda containing this many hot topics, the TELS policy conference is sure to be covered in depth by the world's press. And by sure to be, I mean probably won't be, for reasons that has ever escaped me. So he leaves people hanging in the air. It's all a bit jokey. It's very noticeable that The Guardian doesn't fully get to grips with it. It's almost like they've got the remit of giving a bit of publicity to give it the transparency that the stealth needs. If I could sum it, and I'll show you these because I think you'll find them interesting. This was from 2014, and you've got George Osborne with his delicate little glass sitting in the sunshine, but it's quite clear that if you look at the body language, he is paying attention to what he's being told by the other person. The white-haired gentleman, well, who is that? Well, he's Sir John Kerr, Vice Chairman of Scottish Power. And I've put in here, what was the discussion? Was Sir John Kerr setting up his next big government contract? Well, he could be, because, of course, we don't know what these people are talking. And let's face it, we've got the Chancellor here having a simple tete-a-tete away from public or reporters. And this photo, which we'll inset, it's just the sheer body language. Here's the finger being pointed at Osborne. So he's being told something pretty seriously. Was it this? Was he being told, you listen here, young man, you better get the Bilderberg policies in place? This is a pretty sinister organisation which is drawing in politicians. They're not there for a glass of orange juice. They're there, I think, to be given their marching orders.
Or Coke.
Sorry, he had orange or Coke. Well, it's George Osborne. He probably had Coke, I should think. Mark, are we on with this? I mean, do you see the same thing from American politicians? You've talked to us before about American politicians are actually breaking the law by having these sorts of meetings.
Yes. Well, first of all, we can both confirm that George Osborne is there once again, the first Secretary of State and Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's a common attendant among the UK people at Bilderberg. It does not appear yet that after G7 just happened in South Germany, only an hour away, it doesn't appear that David Cameron is here. Of course, we can keep an eye on that. He's been to Bilderberg before several times, including 2013 in the UK itself. But yes, the latest article that I did on American Free Press website called Bilderberg Baird is about the most significant and frequent attendees from the United States of America, among the 140 or so from North America and Europe that attend each year. That's the basic number, in addition to the pedigree, the backgrounds of the individual attendees. And much couldn't be said about the different attendees from America. I don't know that I'll go into it in extreme detail for your British audience. Some of them include Council on Foreign Relations co-chairman Robert Rubin. And remember, I mentioned earlier that 3 presidential candidates from the U.S., Hillary Clinton, Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina senator, and Marco Rubio, the Florida politician, a senator now, are the ones already vetted by the CFR. And the CFR always has Bilderberg representation, so you can kind of see where that's going. And that's very important to keep an eye on. So Robert Rubin is significant as he's that inroad from the CFR to Bilderberg. And that also involves the Trilateral Commission. And one of the topics I mentioned of the 16 is USA elections. So we'll keep a handle on that. Now, when we move to the rest of the topics this year, as I mentioned, Martin Wolf. Now, Martin Wolf, as you know, is a British national who writes for the Financial Times, and he's one of the select media that's there to take part in Bilderberg but not report. Now, what you mentioned about The Guardian and what Charlie Skelton wrote with his twisted prose, he always acts like he's baffled. He always has this sort of a sarcastic sort of tongue-in-cheek thing going. There's no mystery here at all as to why the media is lost in all this. It's because the media is part of it. And chances are The Guardian has some behind-the-scenes connection to Bilderberg, and that's why they have this kind of fake transparency about all this. There's nothing mysterious about it at all. They're compromised, simply put. But Martin Wolf, in the Financial Times, spoke with Citigroup, and that involved that's not William, but Willem Buiter, B-U-I-T-E-R, and a gentleman from Goldman Sachs, and that man is Gabon Davies, however you say it. And in this interview that Martin Wolf did, let me get that right, there's Martin Wolf, with those 2 men, and Citigroup and Goldman Sachs are always represented at Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission. Now, keeping in mind what the key topics are for Bilderberg this year, Martin Wolf was writing and talking to them, having interviewed them, and a big thing when they mention Greece here on their topics this year, what they're talking about is this major concern that Greece will exit the Eurozone and begin to unravel the euro. And they go into a lot of depth here. And Willem Buiter of Citigroup even goes so far as to say that, and then they talk about Brexit. And as you guys might know, that means the fear that Britain could leave the European Union. And when they're talking about Brexit, as that's called, the Citigroup representative says Brexit could start the unraveling of the European integration that started with the coal and steel community in 1951. Now, that's huge because the European coal and steel community, having started right before Bilderberg in 1951, Bilderberg was formed in 54. The major thrust of the initial formation of Bilderberg was the integration of Europe as a key building block, an Atlantic Union for a global government. And if they're that concerned to put it in print that they fear the unraveling of European integration, then that goes a long way in explaining why they're talking about European strategy, globalization, Greece, and NATO. These topics this year are no doubt going to interlap or interweave with what Martin Wolf wrote here. Because I've written emails to Martin Wolf before. He's always declining to answer my questions. But with a little Sherlock Holmes discernment here, you can get an idea of what's concerning these guys. Everything from U.S. elections to Greece to European strategy and so on and so forth. They want to keep what they've done so far, prevent it from unraveling, even while they try and move forward.
Is TTIP and TPP on the agenda?
Absolutely, and here's how that works. We have to keep in mind that Bilderberg is the hub and things like CFR are the spokes. Bilderberg doesn't operate in isolation. It networks with a lot of think tanks. One of the biggest ones is the Brookings Institution, but there's also business lobbies, and one of the big ones there is the Business Roundtable. Now, that's very significant in the article Bilderberg Baird that's online with AFP right now. Now, Klaus Kleinfeld, who's German-born, I understand, is with Alcoa. Alcoa is that metals conglomerate,
sure,
or metals giant. And Alcoa and Klaus Kleinfeld himself, who's a regular Bilderberg attendee, he's been there every year for quite a long time, Alcoa as a business and Klaus are a member of the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable, in turn, is lobbying tooth, fang, and claw to pass those trade deals. So this is how it works. Bilderberg won't directly say, we want TTIP or we want TPP, but their longtime members in their everyday function will push for it. And this is how the networking works. So right now they're trying to get all the House of Representative members who aren't on board with the Fast Track Authority for Obama. The Business Roundtable is working day and night to bend the arms of those congressmen that want to stand up for the working man and against Fast Track and the TPP.
Well, just say something about Brexit, which is what you mentioned a minute ago, this potential British exit from the EU. Of course, Cameron's job in this is to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Correct.
They're going to run this referendum with a view to getting some kind of faux consent to stay within the European Union. And so he's been travelling, as you know, he's been travelling around Europe, speaking to various European leaders about this. And he is doing it in such a way that they're describing it as renegotiating Britain's relationship with the rest of Europe and the potential for treaty changes and so on. But what's actually going on, it seems, is that he is going around using the migration issue, the immigration issue, as a bargaining chip for the domestic political scene in order to push through or to get an agreement through the referendum to stay within Europe. But the price for any changes on the migration situation is going to be further integration, further creation of a European army and a European Foreign Office, European foreign. We already have some degree of that, but European foreign policy is going to become more formalised with a European army, European military, and we've got an upcoming in the UK. We've got an upcoming defence review, which we're expecting there to be a further cut of something. What is it? 50,000 people in the armed forces in this country, and so this is all part and parcel of that. So I think it would be a mistake to suggest that there's any realistic, unless there's something significant happens on the domestic political scene in terms of individual, the population doing something unusual. I don't think that there's any realistic prospect of Britain leaving Europe, but I think, in fact, the potential, the argument or the discussion around whether Britain will leave Europe or not will bring us into even tighter integration in certain areas.
Yes, that's a good point, Mike, is sometimes these politicians like Cameron will use these issues in a crafty way. It's not as clear-cut as we might assume it is. And so we have to be careful when they raise these issues, what their motives are. One question I have for you is there a general belief among most Brits that they'd rather be out of the EU? Is there a groundswell against being in the EU?
Is there a groundswell? If you take a straw poll, then the answer to that would be yes. If you believe the mainstream media, then the answer to that would be no. But I think we recognise that the answer to that is yes. People do not want to be in the European Union, but of course, the general argument is that unless you're within the European Union, you can't trade. Which it's a ridiculous argument, but that's what they attempt to instill fear in people by pushing that agenda.
They move heaven and earth to make sure that no one nation is very self-sufficient, and that's part of the whole purpose of free trade, is to reduce self-sufficiency, to make everyone artificially interdependent. That being said, to build on what you guys are saying, Martin Wolf in Monday's Financial Times, the same edition, also revealed that what I reported a couple of years ago from covering a Brookings Institution meeting. And remember, Brookings is one of the main Bilderberg think tanks, one of the most influential in the world, and that they're still pushing for fiscal union, which would take away each individual European nation's ability to have a budget, tax and spend budget, and would centralize that in Brussels. And then also a banking union besides the fiscal union, and that's to further consolidate the operations of banking, the European Central Bank and whatnot. So these things, a lot of Bilderberg-related things, that they're not just raised and taken care of in 1 year. They're ongoing projects. I mean, the fact that Bilderberg was formed to integrate Europe, obviously, that's why they're still meeting after over 60 years. Much of what they do cannot be achieved overnight. It's not like they're just going bada bing, bada bing. These things take time, so they're still going for the banking union. They're still going for their fiscal union. As you say, centralizing the military. Everything is about consolidation, globalization, centralization, and they have a lot of very painstaking, difficult goals to achieve. Let's face it, this stuff isn't even easy for them, as much money as they got to throw around.
So,
But,
sorry, Mark.
that's okay. Go
Just
ahead.
as a matter of interest, how much longer is the list of agenda items to normal? Is it double the length? I mean, are they starting to panic here and really feeling themselves that they're running out of time?
Well, this year it's 16. Let's take a look at last year. Let's not speculate. Let's bear with me a minute, unless you guys want to do it on your end. Hold on. Let's get it. Let's get the facts. Let's look at last year. They just posted this year, not a couple of days ago. 1, 2. Last year they had 11.
Right.
This year they have 16. Let's go back another year. Let's go to Britain in 2013. So they went from 11 to 16. They had 12 in I'll go back one more. So from 12 to 11, then to 16. Now let's go to Virginia in 2012. I won't go back any further than that in the interest of time. I'm not sure they have their topics posted. They don't right now have their former Virginia topics posted, but it's not just the number of topics either. It's also the mix, the actual topics themselves.
Yes.
Are quite notable. As I say, USA elections and the Greek matter, and all of that. And of course, last year they had Ukraine, one word, Ukraine. This year they have Russia. So besides the Brexit, besides the possibility of Greece leaving the the Eurozone, they also have this continued jaundiced view of Russia. And no one is saying that Vladimir Putin is an angel. We don't mean that necessarily. We got to keep our objectivity. But they also have Iran on here. Now, Iran, there's this constant sort of Israeli-fed hyper fear that, lo and behold, Iran might emerge with a single nuclear weapon while Israel and the United States have enough nuclear power to blast the planet to pieces. And the hypocrisy is so thick, I can't even see through it. No one can. And so, the topics this year, I think you're right, Mike, do show that they're kind of scrambling to try and keep everything sewed together. Despite their own delusions of grandeur, these people are not as superhuman as they think they are. They're getting older. They're bringing in a few younger guys. Yeah, all that. But at the end of the day, they put their socks on just like you and I do. And, this has got to be a real turning point for them. So they're really keeping things extra tight, extra secluded from the people, taking on an extra amount of topics, very key topics right now. The Middle East is listed. That's probably involving their ISIS, charade show, in my opinion. People that wear jet black with masks in a desert climate. You be the judge. But this is a very important meeting, but a difficult one to cover in some ways.
Well, final question from me then. What does it take to get Henry Kissinger to lie down?
A Mickey, maybe?
Should eat more McDonald's, I should think. More fast food.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys always got a good twist on things. Far better humor than Charlie Skelton. At any rate, he's reaching the end of his days. David Rockefeller, as a footnote, is reaching his 100th birthday, June 12. He doesn't actually appear to be listed anymore. He's getting a bit up there, but his 100th birthday takes place during this Bilderberg meeting. Whether they'll skulk him in there or not remains to be seen. But we're at a very pivotal time. There doesn't seem to be near as many protesters here yet. We Are Change, having been there beforehand, is very commendable. We can thank them for that. I'm hoping some Swiss protesters are to arrive later today that can help figure out ways to get some good photos, not just pictures of checkpoints, and try and get some confirmations of people who are here who might not necessarily be on the official list.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a challenging meeting here, but we have to keep up the fight and not let their stealth transparency become absolute transparency.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much for that. Just one comment from me. We found it fascinating that the BBC is attending this year.
I saw that, yes.
Yeah, Marcus Agius, he was paid about £48,000 a year to do a couple of days' work for the BBC. They didn't actually specify what he did. Of course, former chairman of Barclays. So he's into the banking fraternity. And then we've got Rona Fairhead, from BBC Trustees. Of course, she's an HSBC lady. So very interesting to see the BBC now mixing it inside Bilderberg, and we're going to be mentioning the BBC in a minute. I know you're tight for time today, so I take it that you'd like to be away back for your work in the States, or can you stay?
Well, actually, I should probably cut out. I have to tend to some matters, including getting a hold of some of these activists that hopefully are going to show up. Among other things, Bilderberg, for the alternative media's standpoint, above all, is an awareness campaign to break through the virtual media blackout. The European media, I'm told, has covered this a little bit here in the Telfs region, but overall, what I've seen online and elsewhere shows that even the European media, which usually outshines the U.S. media on Bilderberg, even the European media seems to be dropping the ball and kind of slipping. The Guardian being a noted, if questionable, example otherwise. So,
yeah. Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us. We look forward to having you on UK Column News once again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, well, what else has been happening in the news? Well, let's go from Bilderberg and events on a world scale. Let's home right in to something that was printed in a local Southwest paper. Here's the Western Morning News. Let's have a look at the headline. Ambulance service recruits paramedics from Czech Republic and Slovakia due to a shortage of qualified applicants in England. Now, I think this is a very interesting story. I'm going to say straight away what's going on here is we've got governments of Lib-Lab Con that have destroyed education. They then accuse our youngsters of being unqualified, and then they bring in people from overseas to take their jobs. I believe that this is deliberate policy to help push European integration. What's your thoughts on that, Mike? Do you reckon I've got it about right? This is not about the NHS. This is about the movement of people and jobs.
Absolutely, and I think it ties in with this whole argument that there is going to be over-migration in Europe and our relationship to Europe. But I don't believe for one second that there aren't people with British passports that aren't prepared to do that job. I think we have a large proportion of people in this country that have a sense of empathy and do want to help other people.
Yeah. And
I think that paramedic jobs, it's not like they're below minimum wage jobs. These are reasonable jobs, and I don't believe that they can't find British people to do those jobs.
Yeah. So it's an insult, as the minimum it is, to British people, British youngsters. And as we said on that previous slide, it doesn't matter what the colour of your skin is. If you're in this country and you regard yourself as British, we say we're being exiled in our own country. Well, sticking with The Guardian, here's The Guardian promoting the problems of climate change. But what have we got? Well, British companies, some 80 of them, have been telling David Cameron what his policy should be on climate change and presumably the taxation that comes in with it. So big companies, I think Tesco's in there. So let's get it right. This is the corporate sector driving Conservative policy. And I think it's only fair because, of course, those corporations have been the ones pumping in the millions to the Tories' coffers. Well, The Guardian also seems to be happy to stir up a bit of extra violence in the Middle East. And here they are promoting the need for a sexual revolution. We've had an ordinary revolution in the Middle East. There was enough bloodshed, and now what we want to do is let's start getting in amongst families and social issues, or beg your pardon, to see whether we can destroy that as well. Deliberate, I think it is. And of course, this business over sexual revolution is one of the things that's caused such amazing trouble in the UK. Now we're exporting it. It's pretty cynical stuff, but not as bad as this, which is a report in WND Health pointing out that there's been a recent decision by the European Court of Human Rights, which is simply allowing people to be terminated. And in this case, the gentleman's not able to respond normally, but he's breathing on his own, he's fed, he's in bed, he is alive, he could wake up. But no, the courts have decided that he should be euthanized, and they're quite rightly pointing out the last time this was going on was during the Nazi regime in Germany, for which offenders were convicted at Nuremberg. So we're saying this is the EU declaring its hand now. Where we're headed is Nazi death policies. And of course, the Liverpool Care pathway, in our opinion, was the soft end. If you're going to have this sort of fascist communitarian state, well, you need police who are going to be ruthless. And this article really sums it up. We've got a Sierra Leonean, Sheku Bewa, who died. Basically, Police Scotland have now said, well, we don't have to answer questions if we don't want to. And this is the basic story that the police have just decided themselves that their officers don't need to respond to the Independent Police Investigations Commissioner. So, same police force that put armed police on the streets and then told members of the Scottish Parliament was none of their business. If the police wanted to have armed police on the streets, they would get on and do it. So,
well, this is what happens, isn't it, when you take several police districts, merge them all into one, so that there is no longer any kind of oversight over what each of them is doing.
And put them under the control of one person, which is Sir Stephen House, integrate them with the judiciary and a single party, the Scottish National Party, and you've got a dictatorship already formed in Scotland. And I would presume that David Scott will be updating us on the Scottish model of government when he comes with us on Friday. Well, if you are forming a dictatorship, you need a surveillance society. Let's have a look at how that's progressing under the hand of David Cameron's Tories. This is what we've shown before. This is the hard end of surveillance, the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, GCHQ, and MI5 watching all of us inside the UK. We've got the Cabinet Office involved, the Joint Intelligence Committee, assessment staff, and the National Security Secretariat, National Security Council, Defence Intelligence in the military, and the Office for Security and Counter-Terrorism in the Home Office. Well, remember, this is Britain. So we've got the hard intelligence and spying end, which is on screen. This is the really worrisome thing. We're now heading to what we're calling soft state intelligence and spying. And how is this being brought in? Well, let's come back to the Metro that was pointing out that the government was bringing in private contractors to watch what people are saying about the government on Facebook, Twitter, and personal blogs. So this was the article. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. And what are they actually talking about? Well, if you have a look at this article from wired.co.uk, they've got this to say. Initially, just to allay any fears, this isn't a mass surveillance project like ascribed to GCHQ by Edward Snowden. With this project, the government is attempting to monitor public, not private opinion, by employing several companies with the right data gathering and analysis tools to take on the enormous task of keeping tabs on social media. Well, that's what they start saying, but when you get into the article, this is what they're saying. They're saying that what stands out in the document is the government is talking about monitoring authors of material. Who is that? Well, anyone who might be of interest to the government. And then what they're really interested in is authors who are so effective they're deemed to be influencers to the extent that they can change or influence the opinions and behaviours of others. So this is a massive soft-end commercial spying organisation set up by the government, and let's put it together. So here's the top end. We've got the Cabinet Office working with the Home Office, and we've got everything from behavioural change to common purpose. What's going to happen is this lot is going to be built underneath. So these are the companies. We've got Precise Media Monitoring Limited, we've got LexisNexis, we've got Press Data, we've got Meltwater, we've got Prime Research, we've got Gurkhana, and we've got Runtime Collective, which is actually operating apparently as Brandwatch. So if you're a critic of the British government, you're now an author or influencer, and the government is going to spy on you using public money. Well, let's go a little bit deeper. We just decided to pick on Gurkhana, and we had a look at two of their people. Here's Jeremy Thompson. He's the chief executive, chairman of AMEC, the international trade body driving through continued professionalism of the PR and communications industry. I think, Mike, where they're going here is that if you're not a member of a body, you're not going to be able to comment on the news. But this gentleman, very interesting to me, Andy Brown, formerly responsible for integrating regional and national newspaper and magazine titles and collaborating with sister titles around the world. Many people say now that you can't get local news because, of course, they are all big organisations, and they're part of big organisations, even though they advertise themselves as if they were local news groups. Do you think we're going to be on the end of that spying routine?
Absolutely. I think, of course, stories like this tend to encourage people to be quiet, stop talking.
Yes.
The only way to beat this type of thing is to talk more, talk louder. So if you don't have a Twitter account, if you're not using Facebook for criticising the government, if you're not using Google Plus for criticising the government, you need to start. If you're not encrypting your emails, you need to start. Send your shopping lists to each other by encryption. Do whatever you can to send as much information in an encrypted form as possible. So just speak out as much as possible, because the only way to deal with this is to flood them with so much data that they don't know what to do with it.
That's absolutely correct. And if we just bring this slide of these 7 companies back on screen, this is the other thing which we feel that you should do. If you're unhappy that you're going to be spied on by these private companies using your money, our public money, then what we should do is turn the tables and let's start researching these companies. Let's have a really good look at them. Who are their directors? Where are they based? What interests do they have? What's in their accounts? What political links have they got? What criminal records? What's the real agenda? And let's really get into how they won those government contracts in the first place. So these are dangerous times in UK at the moment. We are seeing now the government saying, well, we're not happy enough to have GCHQ lifting all your emails. What we now need is a whole raft of private companies spying on you, supposedly to see how well government policies are doing. Well, I think that's absolutely right. They're particularly interested in seeing whether policies are failing and the public's waking up to the truth. I think we're about there, Mike,
Yes.
actually. So there we are. We hope that we come under the government classification of authors and influencers. If you like what we're doing in UK Column, Please support, take up a subscription or donate. We can only do what we do with your help and assistance. Can we beat what's happening? Absolutely. What we need is for millions of people to be fully awake. If you think you can help research any of those companies being used by the Cabinet Office, don't wait for us to tell you. Get digging, get researching, but please feedback some of the information so that we can report elsewhere. That's it, I think. Thanks for joining us. See you same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.